I'm Nisha DeGaring.
And I'm Doug Jessup. Family Heritage Stories exist to give you ideas and examples of stories from the past to help shape the future.
It could be anything like a recipe from Grandma or a vacation location where your ancestors came from. These stories deserve to be passed down.
If stories aren't passed down from generation to generation, they're lost. And it's as though those people never existed.
In this episode of Family Heritage Stories, people share special stories about their connections.
We all benefit from heroes among us. Now, they're going to say, it's just part of the job. But it's more than that. It's time for Hero Salute Stories. Obviously, you're a doctor. So what kind of doctor are you?
So I'm what's called a pediatric hospitalist. So that
fantastic.
means I take care of pediatric patients just in hospitalized settings, specifically primary children's hospital.
What in the world possessed you to become a doctor?
I grew up in a family rich with science and healthcare background. My grandfather was a pediatrician in Madison, Wisconsin. My mother was a pediatric nurse practitioner, worked up at the Teen Mom clinic up here at the University of Utah. And my father was a geneticist who brought us out here from Long Island, New York back in the mid-late 1970s.
I understand that you have a special object that has a story behind it.
So there's a couple objects that are really powerful to me. One of them is an old doctor's bag I keep in my office at home that's filled with my grandfather's old tools that he would, take around and back when docs did, home visits to take care of patients. So that one keeps me grounded about a generation of physicians who practiced with a whole lot less knowledge than we have nowadays, and an older set of tools, and a time when polio was ripping through the country and scaring lots of people. So that one keeps me grounded about the history of medicine. I have another picture that's in my office at work of my mother working in clinic and examining a young baby that keeps me grounded in that transition to now me practicing pediatrics at one of the best children's hospitals in the West.
So you mentioned something there about knowledge. To me, knowledge is power. And you also talked about polio. Now, I heard a news report the other day that bluntly scared the crap out of me because I'm going, okay, they're saying that they've actually seen another case of polio in the US, and I thought it was eradicated. So you are actually doing some research and some database tracing of some sort, but you got to explain it a lot better than I can.
Sure.
So explain what this Germ Watch type program is.
Yeah, so GermWatch has been a baby of mine of sorts, dating back to the early 2000s. You can now test for infectious disease organisms. As everybody knows, you can swab your nose and pretty quickly find out if you've got certain infections. The technology nowadays allows you to test for multiple pathogens at the same time and get that information back within a matter of an hour. So we can have some tests that allow us to test for 20 different respiratory illnesses on a single swab.
Wow.
Or a single specimen. And then if you imagine that type of testing capability in a large integrated healthcare delivery system like Intermountain Healthcare has, of which Primary Children's is a part, you can start to aggregate that information, all those data points, and then literally turn that data into information in the form of epidemic curves and maps. And then if you got the right dissemination channels through web pages, through your mobile phone, you can put that information right into the hands of our frontline clinicians and even our healthcare consumers in the state.
So consumers can check out this information
Yeah,
as well.
so we've strived over the last several years to create something akin to a viral weather report that's readily consumable for the public, that comes along with descriptions and action items and things to watch for, so that if you're in the middle of the night, your kid has a fever and a cough, and you're kind of wondering what's going around, you can go at least get some sense of what we're seeing throughout our clinics and our hospital systems in the state.
Okay, so shameless plug, what's the website that people would go to?
So it's germwatch.org or .com or .net, and you can get to it through any of those.
Hero Salute Stories are made possible by the generous support of viewers like you. Go to fedorafoundation.org to donate today.
In this episode of Family Heritage Stories, Don Gale shares stories about his special connections.
Ladies, you can't squeeze the Charmin.
This isn't Charmin, Mr. Whipple. This is new Charmin. Even more squeezably soft.
But,
You can see, feel, and hear the difference. See the bigger puffs, the softness? You can feel the difference. Feel how much softer. Even here. It's really...
no matter how irresistibly soft, please don't squeeze the new Charmin.
Mr. Whipple.
Introducing new Charmin. So much softer you can see, feel, and hear the difference. New soft fragrance, too.
Mr. Green? Mr. Green?
Yeah.
You need any help? I just want you to know, I think you're the best ever.
Yeah, sure.
Want my Coke? It's okay, you can have it.
No.
Really, you can have it.
Okay.
A Coke and a smile makes me feel good, makes me feel nice.
Be around.
That's the way it should be. I like to say,
Hey, kid.
the whole world is smiling with me. Coca-Cola has life. Have a Coke and
Thanks, Mean Joe.
smile.
There's a special bond between grandparents and grandkids.
Tell me a story about your grandma or grandpa.
My grandfather on my dad's side loved to experiment with whatever was left over, whether it be in the pantry or in the fridge. He would take everything and throw it into what he called goulash. And sometimes it was sweet, and sometimes it was bitter, and other times who knows what it was, but inedible. So that was one thing. But when it came to things like Thanksgiving, yeah, that's the one that everybody thinks of, but I was with every one of my cousins. I was with every one of my aunts and uncles, and we had 20 to 30 people and had these amazing stories that we would sit and listen to about our family on Thanksgiving. And so that's one reason that a Thanksgiving dinner became so imperative and important in our family, because our family heritage, our genealogy is so important to us. My family moved out here to escape persecution in the early 1800s, and that kind of a culture, the things that they built, the knowledge that they wanted, the wisdom they wanted to gain, education was very important. The things that revolved around those early pioneers, industry, I think those are very important to look at when it comes to my personal culture here in Utah, because I was blessed to know my great-grandparents, all my grandparents, and for a long time. One of my favorite stories is actually of my grandfather, who was a doctor here in Salt Lake City for many, many years, and he treated many members of the LDS Church. He, one night, received a call from Gordon B. Hinckley, his wife, saying that he was sick and they don't know what's wrong with him. He ran up there. They didn't know what was going on. His pressure was dropping. They thought he was ready to pass. He told the family to prepare. And he walked into the room alone with the prophet. He set down his stethoscope and he gave him a blessing, and he got better. Now, granted, that's more for an LDS crowd, but he ran into those kinds of things throughout his life in Salt Lake, working with immigrants, working with the church, working through the valley, all of these miracles that he saw happen as a doctor.
What was his name?
Melvin R. Davis.
There's nothing like a romantic getaway.
The fresh air of the Cotswolds makes you fall in love all over again. As travellers, we're always looking for new experiences and new inspirations.
There was so many secrets that we discovered here.
It's like a different world.
I feel like I found a bit of home here in the Cotswolds.
Austin Warwood. I was gonna tell you a joke about time travel. You didn't like it.
What does heritage mean to you?
Hi guys, this is Doug Jessup. I am with this guy right here, a broadcast legend and journalism legend, I guess we'll say as well, Don Gale. So Don, thank you so much for coming on today.
Happy to be here.
I remember you were on the KSL editorial board for eons.
20 years.
And I always loved it. Was kind of the must-see, must-hear type stuff. Because I started in radio and then went to the TV side of things. But what was your first journalism job?
I guess the first real job I had was teaching it.
Oh, really?
When I switched to journalism, the head of the department, he appreciated me, and he asked me to first be an assistant teacher and then to take a full class, and eventually I got on the faculty. After I'd earned my master's degree, and so and I taught for almost 10 years.
And what was the university there that you taught at?
University of Utah. I also taught at Weber State, Weber University now, not Weber. And I enjoyed every minute of it. I have a great friend named Ted Kapner who was also in the business.
Oh, yep, up to you.
And he used to call me once in a while and say, so-and-so's looking for a writer. Why don't you contact him? So I'd do that, and often ended up with a freelance job. And one day he called me and said, the editorial writer at KSL just quit, just decided to retire, and he changed jobs. And they're looking for somebody who can fill in for a while they find a permanent. And I said, yeah, I'd love to. So I went down and interviewed with L.H. Curtis, who was then the general manager of television. And he hired me to do some freelance editorials. And they agreed to pay me $25 for every one that went on the air, which, was nothing. But I was broke.
Yeah.
I needed every penny. So I wrote some editorials for him, and he read them on the air, as he had always done. And every one I wrote ended up on the air.
Wow.
And so just before Christmas in '78, I think, he offered me a full-time job as that. And
hopefully more than $25 a pop. Yeah,
I would have taken any job.
Right.
Excuse me. So I did. And I suddenly had a paycheck and benefits. I liked that, and so did my family.
Oh, yeah.
We could pay the rent for the first time, and this went on for about 6 months, and I wrote all of Kurt's daily editorial, one a day, and he read them, and he got some response to some of them. I wrote one, my most famous one during that period was about the Super Bowl. The Denver Broncos were playing the Cowboys. And I wrote an editorial in which I had the usual KSL, it doesn't matter who wins, it's how you play, all that trivia, all that junk. You know? And then at the end, I had Kurt. I found out he had been a thespian at BYU. He'd been an actor, among other things. And I had him pour a bottle of Orange Crush into a glass And the Broncos were then known as the Orange Cars.
I remember, yeah.
And he picked up that glass and drank it at the end of the commercial. And he got more letters and response for that than anything he'd ever done. And that's really what got me the job. But we had a lot of fun, Kurt and I, because I took advantage of his acting ability. And
well, but here's the question, though, okay? Because I remember you going on the air, so either he got sick and somebody had to fill in, or something happened that went from ghostwriting to you being on the air.
It was internal politics.
Oh, yeah.
You've heard about how that works.
Even KSL is politics. Yeah.
Anyway, that's a long story.
Yeah, I hear you.
But he got promoted to Bonneville Corporation, which is a parent company. And he was a vice president. And Jay Lloyd became the general manager at KSL. And Jay called me in and said, "We want you to go on the air." And I said, "No way, I'm not going on the air." And we argued a little, and he sent me to a voice coach in Iowa.
Wow.
Who was not at all interested in coaching me or anything to do with editorial. But I did a tape, a test tape. It was just horrendous. It was just, I have the slowest voice. The coach in Iowa said, "I've known people who spoke more slowly than you do, but they were all dead," which gave me a lot of confidence.
Yeah, well, you're methodical. You're just like, okay, right?
Jay insisted that I cut that. It was just so bad, so bad. But he insisted that I'd go on the air anyway. And so I had a little choice. One of my friends who was in the advertising business came up to me one day at a social we were at, and he said, "You have the worst voice on television," and walked away. Came back and he said to me, "But it works because people believe that KSL wouldn't put such an untalented guy on the air unless you had something to say."
Okay.
Coming up a little bit later in the show, we find out the story behind one of those treasures remembered here at Anthony's Fine Art and Antiques.
Hi, this is Doug Jessup. I was recently impressed by an interview with a gentleman by the name of Mike Tingey. Now, he brought an outline of different things we wanted to talk about. We're not talking paragraphs here. We're not talking big, huge stories. We're talking a word here or there. With those simple notes, I was able to weave in transitions that made the story kind of go in a rhythmic pace, if you will, because he wants to make sure these stories are passed down to his children and his grandchildren. Life's kind of funny that way. The interaction of stories and experiences, is it fate or is it circumstance? Well, personally, I believe that things happen for a reason. The point is, are you actually listening? Are you in a place mentally, physically, emotionally to be able to understand and be receptive to those lessons that life is trying to teach you? It kind of reminds me of the line from Forrest Gump. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never quite know what you're going to get. Well, I understand that, but you know what? We need to put a big asterisk next to it because, sorry to tell you kids, but there's a cheat sheet in a lot of these boxes. Those little squiggles on the chocolates, they mean something. They're just little subtle cues. The question is, are you looking for those subtle cues? That's the mission of the Fedora Foundation and Family Heritage Stories. One story at a time, one experience at a time, collected, preserved, and distributed to the next generation. This show is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you. Now, if you like Family Heritage Stories, and I hope you do because you're watching right now, we'd sure appreciate your donation today at fedorafoundation.org.
Hi, this is Candace at Lanny Bernard Gallery, Chalk Garden at Trolley Square. We'll be right back with Family Heritage Stories.
Your history is everywhere, if you know where to look. But searching through all this? Are you kidding me? Actually, Kindex makes it easy to gather records and add them to your online archive. So everyone can jump in and index their records, making every word searchable. With Kindex, I know them anyway.
You learn a lot about traditions, values, and culture when you travel.
We're at Athelhampton House, as it now is known. In the 16th century, it's often called Adlamston or Adelampton or Athelhampton in various different documents that I've got at the time, and it tends to be a hall rather than a house because this room that we're in here is the Great Hall. That's where it started. It's a hall rather than a house, in the same way that many other 16th century buildings that you might visit are also called such and such hall. Ingatestone Hall, Kentwell Hall, those sorts of places. Because I'm not wearing any accessories, I don't have fancy hat or a partlet which can be used to cover the neck, and I don't have any cuffs or ruffs or anything else on. It's anywhere between about 1530 and 1620 this would be acceptable for. As a sort of basic working woman's garment. So the utter joy of recreating the clothing, trying to work out how things work, is looking at the pictures. We've got a jigsaw puzzle. We're looking at a jigsaw puzzle through the wrong end of a telescope. We can't. It's all mixed up. We've got pieces missing. We can never tell for certain what life was like. But at least with things like, well, how does the headgear work, for instance? How do the French hoods work? How does if we're doing blackwork embroidery on a smock, for instance, I mean, one of the projects I'm working on at the moment is recreating a garment that's a single line of a song, a smock of silk, both fair and white, with gold embroidered gorgeously. What does that mean? And how, practically speaking, could you deal with having a smock made of silk when we have no surviving examples? It doesn't turn up in Elizabeth I's wardrobe accounts or inventories or anything else. So then trying to work out the practical side of why did they do things, how did they do things, how did things work, and then presenting that to people who, in some cases, have a slightly more warped view of history thanks to television shows or things that are taught at school, because research is always developing. History, just because of the fact that it happened a long time ago, it's not always the same. I mean, even just in this house, the research I've been doing here, it's been constantly changing through even the last few months, working out when things were built, who built them, why did they do things, what were the possible motivations. We're never going to know anything for certain, but trying to get a little bit closer to what people thought, why people thought that way, is just fascinating.
In the holiday mood, lad? This'll get us there in a jiffy. Not now, Gromit. Suitcase, light holiday reading, trusted travel companion. Holidays, here we come. Blast. Why didn't you think of this before, lad? I never knew there was so much to do.
For cracking UK deals, search Your Great Adventure or visit participating travel agents.
Objects with stories are treasures remembered. It's time now for a visit with Dr. Micah Christensen.
Here with Dr. Micah Christensen with Anthony's Fine Art. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous stained glass. Now, it looks like it's based on a famous painting.
That's right. Many people will be familiar with this image because it was based on a painting by the German artist Heinrich Hoffmann. This was made by Tiffany Studios in 1893 for the Danbury Baptist Church in Connecticut. It was made at the height of stained glass making in technique and quality in America by the greatest maker who arguably ever made work in stained glass. Because Tiffany hired some of the best makers and designers, technicians from around the world. Stained glass, it's a dangerous activity. It requires very high temperature and materials, and many of the materials that they were using to make the stained glass are now illegal to work with. So you've got heavy metals like this green, which is a derivative of copper, or the white, which is a derivative of lead. And what you would do is you would used the mordants, which just means it bites into the glass, like arsenic, like mercury, and they would be fired at very high temps. You wouldn't live to a good old age usually if you were making stained glass. There's real texture in this. That's called drapery glass, which is a technique introduced by Tiffany. Some of it stands as far as an inch away from the window itself.
Everyone has a story.
And sometimes those stories are told through music.
Trees that grow so fair, old England to adorn. Greater are none beneath the sun than oak and ash and thorn. Sing oak and ash and thorn, good sirs, all on a midsummer's morn. Surely we'll sing of no little thing in oak and ash and thorn. Old in churchyard mold, he breatheth a mighty bow. Older for shoes do wise men choose, and beech for cups also. But when you have killed in your bowl, it is filled, and your shoes are clean outworn. Back you must speed for all that you need to oak and ash and thorn. Sing oak and ash.
What makes you smile? Spry mouthwash helps me smile. I think it might help you too.
It's our honor to be able to help people remember where they came from.
The Fedora Foundation supports the collection, preservation, and distribution of diverse stories of traditions, values, and culture through Family Heritage Stories, on TV and online at familyheritagestories.org.
How do you want to be remembered? With another episode of Family Heritage Stories, I'm Nisha DeGaring.
And I'm Doug Jessup.